All right. Reading out of the NIV translation and starting off in chapter 3 today. Today is April 30th, 2022. This is the last day of April. I like to do a slam dunk with certain things, and that's what I'm going to do today and other areas of my walk with Christ. Praise God. So we're going to dive right into it, chapter 3. Crossing the Jordan, verse 1. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Verse 5, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know what I am with you, as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the ark of the covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Verse 12. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away, at a town called Adam, in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabah, parentheses, that is, the Dead Sea, close parentheses, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priest who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. And that completes chapter 3. Chapter 4, verse 1. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on the shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, verse 6, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Verse 8. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priest who carried the ark of the covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. Verse 10. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the ark of the Lord and the priests came to the other side, while the people watched. The men of Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh crossed over ready for battle, in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him in all the days of his life, just as they had stood in awe of Moses. Verse 15, Then the Lord said to Joshua, Command the priests carrying the ark of the covenant law to come up out of the Jordan. So Joshua commanded the priests, Come up out of the Jordan. And the priests came up out of the river, carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. Verse 19, On the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, In the future, when your descendants ask their parents, What do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea, when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. And that completes chapter 4. Chapter 5, verse 1. Now when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. They were smart. Circumcision and Passover at Gilgal. Verse 2. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibbeth Haraloth. Now this is why he did so. All those who came out of Egypt, all the men of military age, died in the wilderness on the way after leaving Egypt. All the people that came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not. The Israelites had moved about in the wilderness 40 years until all the men who were of military age when they left Egypt had died, since they had not obeyed the Lord. For the Lord had sworn to them that they would not see the land he had solemnly promised their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So he raised up their sons in their place, and these were the ones Joshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. And after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. Verse 9. Then the Lord said to Joshua, Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. Verse 10. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites. But that year they ate the produce of Canaan. The fall of Jericho. Oh, we're already here? Oh my gosh, going by fast. Verse 13. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. This is great. This is amazing. Joshua went up to him and asked, Are you for us or for our enemies? Neither, he replied. I was getting chills. Just getting chills. Verse 14, neither, he replied, but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come. Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, what message does my Lord have for this servant? The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. And that completes chapter 5. Now I believe that scholars say that Joshua met the triune God, right? Who is, right? Let's go back. Who is the commander of the Lord's army? Commander of the army of the Lord. Is that God? Is that Jesus? Who's the commander? I'm not too sure. Not too sure. I need to look more into this. Chapter 6, verse 1. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. That completes verse 4. When I read this for the first time last year, I really thought that, can we do this today? Can the body of Christ do this today? Can the body of Christ wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to church, the church you go to, walk around it one time, not even saying a word, praying in your mind. Just walk around. Do this for 7 days. On the 2nd day, walk around twice. 3 days, 3 times, etc., etc. And on the 7th day, walk around 7 times. You can even touch the building, right? Touch it. And then shout with a loud praise 7 times, hallelujah. And see if it doesn't shake the atmosphere in the ground where that building is at. I wonder. Verse 5. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. So Joshua son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance! March around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. Verse 8. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding, but Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout, then shout. Verse 11, so he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Verse 12, Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord. While the trumpets kept sounding, so on the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. Verse 15. On the seventh day they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except on the day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury." Verse 20. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Verse 22. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her." So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. Smell a nice aroma. Verse 26. At that time Joshua pronounced the solemn oath, "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest he will set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. And that completes chapter 6. Achan's sin, chapter 7, verse 1. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Remember, that completes verse 1. So remember that, notice how the description of the person, Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, their lineage is spoken of. Wouldn't it be cool to speak like that nowadays? Who are you? Right? It's like, it's like I think about that one episode of Fresh Prince where the guy's dad, or the girl's dad, asked the girl's guy who's trying to be with her, "Who's your dad? Where you work?" He's asking like a billion questions, right? And it's so funny because, one, you don't see that nowadays. Two, it's funny because, I guess it's not funny. It's actually caring. It's actually loving. You're trying to know, like, where do you come from? Who do you come from? Where's your lineage? What does your family represent? And it's vital, right? I believe that it is vital, and that's why everything we do has a representation of where we come from, where we're at, who we're with, right? It'd be cool to get back to that. In that context, it was about a girl, but still, you gotta know where this man's coming from. Where's his heart? He's trying to, what's his motives with my daughter? What are you trying to do? You know, it's got to be that serious. And if he's a righteous man, he will say, you know it. And the Father should be able to detect if the man is of a pure heart and if he means right. So verse 2, now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth Aven to the east of Bethel, and told them, go up and spy out the region. So the men went up and spied out Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army. Not worry, weary the whole army. But only a few people lived there. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai. Verse 5, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. Interesting. Verse 7, and Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say, now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name? Verse 10. The Lord said to Joshua, stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things they have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. Verse 13, go consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe the Lord chooses shall come forward clan by clan. The clan the Lord chooses shall come forward family by family, and the family the Lord chooses shall come forward man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted thing shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Verse 16, early the next morning Joshua had Israel come forward by tribes, and Judah was chosen. The clans of Judah came forward, and the Zerahite were chosen. He had the clan of the Zerahite come forward by families, and Zimri was chosen. Joshua had his family come forward man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was chosen. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Achan replied, it is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent, with the silver underneath. Excuse me. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was hidden in his tent, with the silver underneath. Verse 23, they took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and all he had, to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, "Why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today." Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore that place has been called the Valley of Acre ever since. Chapter 7 completed. Wow. One of the first questions I ask in my mind is that, why does God go to that extent of killing someone? And especially having them stoned, right? And then by fire. It's interesting to me. There's something there. God was not playing around during those times, because you basically mocked him, slapped him in the face, and spit on him. Because you didn't trust him. You didn't trust the word from his messenger, Joshua. Wow. Man, that smells very good aroma. Chapter 8. A destroyed. A is spelled AI, like artificial intelligence, but there's no punctuation, there's no dots in between. So it's A or I think it's A. AI. A destroyed. Chapter 8, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack A. For I have delivered into your hands the king of A, his people, his city, and his land." That complete verse 1. Notice how Jesus tells Joshua again, do not be afraid. And do not be discouraged. I think this explains the heart of not only the Lord, but of Joshua and the man that he was. Because he was dealing with something, right? He was dealing with something the way he was. He was probably grieving, he was afraid, and everything that happened, the Israelites were killed, and it's like, man, and Moses dies, he's the next leader, he's probably going through a lot, right? So, yeah. Again, interesting. Verse 2, "You shall do this to A and its king, as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Set an ambush behind the city." So Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack A. He chose 30,000 of his best fighting men and sent them out at night with these orders. "Listen carefully. You are to set an ambush behind the city. Do not go very far from it. All of you be on the alert. I and all those with me will advance on the city, and when the men come out against us, as they did before, we will flee from them. They will pursue us until we have lured them away from the city, for they will say, 'They are running away from us,' as they did before. So when we flee from them, you are to rise up from ambush and take the city. The Lord your God will give it into your hand." Such a strategic strategy, my God. Verse 8, "When you have taken the city, set it on fire. Do what the Lord has commanded. See to it. You have my orders." Then Joshua sent them off, and they went to the place of ambush and lay in wait between Bethel and Ai, to the west of Ai. But Joshua spent the night with the people. Early the next morning, Joshua mustered his army, and he and the leaders of Israel marched before them to Ai. The entire force that was with him marched up and approached the city and arrived in front of it. They set up camp north of Ai, with a valley between them and the city. Joshua had taken about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai, to the west of the city. So the soldiers took up their positions with the main camp to the north of the city and the ambush to the west of it. That night Joshua went into the valley. When the king of Ai saw this, he and all the men of the city hurried out early in the morning to meet Israel in battle at a certain place overlooking the Arabah. But he did not know that an ambush had been set against him behind the city. Joshua and all Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled toward the wilderness. All the men of Ai were called to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after Israel. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel. Verse 18, then the Lord said to Joshua, hold out toward Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver the city. So Joshua held out toward the city the javelin that was in his hand. As soon as he did this, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their position and rushed forward. They entered the city and captured it and quickly set it on fire. Verse 20, the men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising up into the sky, but they had no chance to escape in any direction. The Israelites who had been fleeing toward the wilderness had turned back against the pursuers. For when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city and the smoke was going up from it, they turned around and attacked the men of Ai. Those in the ambush also came out of the city against them, so that they were caught in the middle, with Israelites on both sides. Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivors nor fugitives. But they took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. When Israel had finished killing all the men of Ai in the fields and in the wilderness, where they had chased them, and when every one of them had been put to the sword, all the Israelites returned to Ai and killed those who were in it. 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai. Verse 26, for Joshua did not draw back the hand that held out his javelin until he had destroyed all who lived in Ai. But Israel did carry off for themselves the livestock and plunder of the city. The Lord had instructed Joshua. Verse 28, so Joshua burned Ai and made it a permanent heap of ruins, a desolate place to this day. He impaled the body of the king of Ai on a pole and left it there until evening. At sunset, Joshua ordered them to take the body from the pole and throw it down at the entrance of the city gate. And they raised a large pile of rocks over it, which remains to this day. The covenant renewed at Mount Ebal. Verse 30. Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses the servant of the Lord had commanded the Israelites. He built it according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones, on which no iron tool had been used. On it they offered to the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There, in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua wrote on stones a copy of the law of Moses. All the Israelites with their elders, officials, and judges were standing in both sides of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, facing the Levitical priest who carried it. Both the foreigners living among them and the native-born were there. Half of the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had formerly commanded when he gave instructions to bless the people of Israel. Verse 34, afterward Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as it is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and children and the foreigners who lived among them. And that completes chapter 8. Notice how it says women and children. You know, I admire people who tell, I wouldn't say everything to the kids, but the real truthful about what they tell the kids. Like things that you're not supposed to tell a kid, but yet that kid's going to find out later by someone else. So it's probably better that the parent told them first, so that way they can build a trust and say, oh, my dad talked to me about this, my mom told me about this, let me go talk to my mom about this. It might just be my own way of thinking and doing something. I don't have kids, but I do have brothers and sisters, so I always admire that about people, you know. Kids are not stupid. Kids are not stupid. Matter of fact, we have a phone in today's age where kids have at younger ages than what I did or my parents did, right? What do you think they're seeing? What do you think they're looking at? What do you think they're listening to from their friends with phones who can access any information they want? Because I guarantee you not all their phones are tapped in and have a privacy setting to where they can't search certain things. They're gonna look up stuff, they're gonna find stuff, and they're gonna hear stuff. So if they're not getting it from their parents, from a church, they're gonna get it from somewhere else. And I can see some rebellion and disobedience happening because of that. Because why wouldn't you want to tell your kids the truth? Why wouldn't you want to prepare them for the truth, for the world that they are in, which they have no idea at that time, but they will, Lord willing, when they get older. I pray I do that with my kids. In the right way, with the right tone, with the right love, and not belittle them just because they are little. Is it true that you could belittle even a little child? Yeah. You think they're dumb. You think they're stupid. You think they don't know. Kids know. Matter of fact, kids detect probably more than what a lot of adults do. Young adults, teenagers. Well, teenagers do for sure. But kids, man, they're a gift from God, right? Children are a gift from the Lord. All right. Chapter 9. Little break, slight break. Drink break. Oh, it's beautiful weather in the Sunshine State. Got some rain. Thinking about getting a haircut really soon. Paul's message to the Corinth has been convicting me. Let's just say that, to say the least. It's convicting me. So, alright, let's go back. Chapter 9. The Gibeonite deception, verse 1. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." The Israelites said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?" Verse 8. "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled with were new, but see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey.'" Verse 14. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out, and on the third day came to their cities, Gibeon, Kippara, Beroth, and Kirahath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them, because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly." So the leaders promised to them what promised to them was kept. Verse 22. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you deceive us by saying, 'We live in a long way from you,' while actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers from the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this." Verse 25. "We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly, to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day. That completes chapter 9. Chapter 10. Oh, yes. The sun stands still. All right? You believe the word, you believe the Bible, you believe God did this, okay? Chapter 10, verse 1. Now Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace while Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this, because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Param, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Derby, king of Eglon. "Come up and help me attack Gibeon," he said, "because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites." Verse 5. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up position against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." Verse 7. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. Verse 10. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. I'm gonna pause right now. I'm sorry. I'm just getting like some dark thoughts, negative thoughts, or stuff from my past. Just right now, it's just like hitting me. I just feel it, you know. I plead the blood of Jesus, and I rebuke those thoughts. I rebuke the past, and I submit it to the obedience of Christ, to you, Lord, and I plead the blood of Jesus. My sins are wiped away. Clean in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I'm going to read verse 13 again. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. That is interesting. The book of Jashar. What is that book? It's that book, huh? I think it's a book of poems. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. So, yeah. It said, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. Do you believe that? Do you really believe that? I do. Because you know why? In the gospel it says, "For man this is impossible, but for God all things are possible." You know, I think this is a testament of other people's faith, and really, if they really believe the God of the Bible, not the God of the New Testament, not the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Bible, because it's the same God. Do you believe it? And if you don't, because I think Christians, they want to believe it, or how do I say this? I'm not going to say the person's name, but it's like they give excuses, like, "Oh yeah, but you know, it was just a day. It was just like the sun just standing still." Like they put no like emphasis. They don't put no glory behind it. It was just like, it was something like, yeah, God did, but it wasn't something big. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, to me, it just shows a testament of their own faith. Yeah, because God did this for Joshua and the Israelites. All right, 5 Amorite kings killed. Verse 16. Now the 5 kings had fled and hidden in the cave of Makkedah, When Joshua was told that the 5 kings had been found hiding in the cave at Makkedah, he said, "Roll large rocks up to the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies. Attack them from the rear and don't let them reach their cities. For the Lord your God has given them into your hand." So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach the fortified cities. The whole army then returned safely to Joshua in the camp of Makkedah, and no one uttered a word against the Israelites. Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me." So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. When they had brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with them, "Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings." So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Verse 25, Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight." Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. Remember why, right? There's something about you can't leave a man's dead on a pole overnight. I think we read that, right? In the Torah. Verse 27. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles and threw them into the cave where they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day. Southern cities conquered. Verse 28. That day Joshua took Makkedah. He put the city and its king to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it. He left no survivors, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Makkedah to Libnah and attacked it. Verse 30. The Lord also gave that city and its king into Israel's hand. The city and everyone in it Joshua put to the sword. He left no survivors there, and he did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Libnah to Lachish. He took up positions against it and attacked it. The Lord gave Lachish into Israel's hands, and Joshua took it on the 2nd day. The city and everyone in it he put to the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. Meanwhile, Horam, king of Gezer, had come up to help Lachish, but Joshua defeated him and his army until no survivors were left. Verse 34. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Lachish to Eglon. They took up positions against it and attacked it. They captured it that same day and put it into the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it, just as they had done to Lachish. Then Joshua and all Israel with him went up from Eglon to Hebron and attacked it. They took the city and put it to the sword, together with its king, its villages, and everyone in it. They left no survivors, just as at Eglon. They totally destroyed it and everyone in it. Verse 38. Then Joshua and all Israel with him turned around and attacked Debir. They took the city, its kings, and its villages, and put them to the sword. Everyone in it they totally destroyed. They left no survivors. They did to Debir and its king as they had done to Libnah and its king and to Hebron. Verse 40. So Joshua subdued the whole region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, and the mountain slopes. Together with all their kings, he left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua subdued them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the whole region of Goshen to Gibeon. All these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. And that completes chapter 10. I love that at the end it says, All these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. So yeah. I think there's 24 chapters in Joshua. And yes, I am right. So we're gonna see if we can get halfway done. All right, chapter 11. Northern kings defeated. Verse 1. When Jabin, king of Hazor, heard of this, he sent word to Jobab, king of Madon, to the kings of Shimron and Akshapah, and to the northern kings who were in the mountains, in the Arabah south of Kinnereth, in the western foothills, and in Naphoth Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and west, to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the hill country, and to the Hivites below Hermon in the region of Mizpah. They came out with all their troops and a large number of horses and chariots, a huge army, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Verse 5. All these kings joined forces and made camp together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them slain over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn the chariots. So Joshua and his whole army came against them suddenly at the waters of Merom and attacked them. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel. They defeated them and pursued them all the way to Greater Sidon, to Meserapoth Maim, and to the valley of Mizpah on the east, until no survivors were left. Joshua did to them as the Lord had directed. He hamstrung their horses and burned the chariots. Verse 10. At that time Joshua turned back and captured Hazor, and put its king to the sword. Parentheses, Hazor had been the head of all these kingdoms. Close parentheses. Verse 11. Everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed. And he burned Hazor itself. Joshua took all these royal cities and their kings and put them to the sword. He totally destroyed them, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. Yet Israel did not burn any of the cities built on their mountains, except Hazor, which Joshua burned. Verse 14. The Israelites carried off for themselves all the plunder and livestock of these cities, but all the people they put to the sword until they completely destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed, as the Lord commanded his servant Moses. So Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He left nothing undone of all the Lord commanded Moses. Verse 16. So Joshua took this entire land, the hill country, all the Negev, the whole region of Goshen, the western foothills, the Arabah, and the mountains of Israel with their foothills, from Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir, to Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon, below Mount Hermon. He captured all their kings and put them to death. Joshua waged war against all these kings for a long time, except for the Hivites living in Gibeon. Not one city made a treaty of peace with the Israelites, who took them all in battle. For it was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel, so that he might destroy them totally, exterminating them without mercy, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Verse 21. At that time Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. No Anakites were left in Israelite territory, only in Gaza. Gath and Ashdod did any survive. Verse 23. So Joshua took the entire land, just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal divisions. And the Lord had rest from war. Then the land had rest from war. And that completes chapter 11. All right. Chapter 12. List of defeated kings. Verse 1. These are the kings of the land whom the Israelites had defeated, and whose territory they took over the east of the Jordan. from the Arnon Gorge to Mount Hermon, including all the eastern sides of the Arabah. Shihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, he ruled from Aroer on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, from the middle of the gorge to the Jabbok River, which is the border of the Amorites. This included half of Gilead. He also ruled over the eastern Arabah from the Sea of Galilee to the Sea of the Arabah, that is, the Dead Sea, to Beth Jeshimoth, and then southward below the slopes of Pisgah, and the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephites who reigned in Ashtaroth and Edrei. He ruled over Mount Hermon, Salakah, all of Bashan to the border of the people of Geshur and Makkah, and half of Gilead to the border of Shihon, king of Heshbon. Verse 6. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the Israelites conquered them. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh to their possession. Here is a list of the kings of the land that Joshua and the Israelites conquered on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir. Joshua gave their lands as inheritance to the tribes of Israel according to their tribal divisions. The lands included the hill country, the western foothills, the Arabah, the mountain slopes, the wilderness, and the Negev. These were the lands of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These were the kings: the king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, near Bethel, 1. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Geder, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tapruha, 1. The king of Hephar, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. The king of Madon, 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron, Meron, 1. The king of Akshpa, 1. Verse 21. The king of Tanakh, 1. The king of Megiddo, 1. The king of Kadesh, 1. The king of Jokneam in Carmel, 1. The king of Dor in Napoth Dor, 1. The king of Goyim and Gilgal, 1. Verse 24. The king of Tirzah, 1. 31 kings in all. That completes chapter 12. Wow. All right, so that's gonna, I'm gonna stop it right there. I might come back to it later. We have land still to be taken. Division of the land west of the Jordan. Yeah, we still got some. So, yes, praise God. All right, bye.